Welcome. Charlotte Griffin here from Berlin Patton Ebling, and we're proud to be sponsoring today's property appraisal session with Bill Furst. Bill Furst had over 40 years of experience in the real estate industry and began his career in real estate appraisal in Coral Gables, Florida. Bill is a licensed real estate broker and building contractor and past president of the Sarasota Association of Realtors. Bill was first elected Sarasota County Property Appraiser in August 2008 and began his third term in January of 2017. Bill is committed to serving the citizens of Sarasota County with integrity during his terms as Property Appraiser. Please welcome Bill Furst.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I need to update my resume. I think in the past 20 months, I've attended hundreds of Zoom meetings, but this is the first one that I've had to conduct. And so thank you for being here. I hope you will ask questions either in the chat room or somewhere so that we can get your questions answered. A little about my job and what I do. I work and report to the Florida Department of Revenue. They're the folks that approve my budget. They audit what I do. And a lot of people think that I work for the Board of County Commissioners, but I really don't. And I don't think you would want them telling me how to value properties. The state tells the Board of County Commissioners that they need to provide me office space, and they pay me according to a formula that's outlined in the Constitution. In fact, the property appraiser's job, the sheriff, the supervisor of election, tax collector, and the clerk of the court are all considered constitutional officers because our job descriptions, our salaries, our benefits, everything is actually outlined in the Constitution of the state of Florida. Working for the Department of Revenue is really interesting. They give me a rule book to follow, and then the legislature passes all sorts of laws that I have to follow and interpret. Then there's court cases and that affect what I do, but really who provides me the most guidance is my attorney. And the problem that's created by that, the state not providing us much guidance, is that we have 67 property appraisers in the state of Florida and 67 attorneys telling them how to function and operate. So those of you that are in Manatee County and with my good friend Charlie Hackney as the property appraiser, he and I might do things totally different. And he's doing it right and I'm doing it right because it's the way that we interpret things. For instance, new construction, I think we do a little bit differently. What the rule book says is if a property is substantially complete for its intended purpose on January 1st, it has to be placed on the tax roll. What the state doesn't do in the rule book is define substantially complete. So they leave it up to the property appraiser to say, well, I think it's got to have a CO, or I think it's got to have the appliances in, or it's got to have water in the pool. And so every property appraiser kind of determines things a little bit differently. And there's a lot of things in the rule book that say the property appraiser may. And so some property appraisers do and some don't. The best example of that is Florida Homestead Tax Exemption. Most of you are probably aware that the rule on it is that it needs to be filed between January 1 and March 1. You've got a 2-month window there. However, the rule book goes on to say that a property appraiser may allow people to file until 25 days after the mailing of the trim notice. Most of you probably just got your trim notice in the mail. So we mailed ours on the 16th of August. So 25 days after the 16th, I could still be taking homestead exemption applications for the year 2021. And we do that. I don't know how many phone calls we got about homestead when we sent the trims out, but we got over 6,500 phone calls, people saying, I got this notice, what's it mean? Or I don't like this, or I don't like that. And in that same 4-week period, we processed 953 homestead applications that people should have filed and hadn't filed. So, it really works. And some property appraisers just say, after March 1, we don't take them. We take them 365 days a year. After the 25th day of the trim, we started taking homestead applications for 2022. We actually handle all the exemptions for Sarasota County. So anybody that files an exemption, and homestead's the biggest one, we have right at 130,000 homesteaded properties in Sarasota County. So we do all that paperwork. The next largest category, which drops way down, is there are 13,980 widows who own a primary residence in Sarasota County that get an additional exemption for being a widow. We do things like service people in the state of Florida. If you're deployed overseas on active duty, you don't pay any real estate tax. So we've got to track all those people. And we had 6 people that qualified for that exemption. And they kind of get upset with us because if they're a reservist and they get tagged for active duty, they get sent someplace like Fort Hood for 6 weeks, 7 weeks of training. Their taxes don't abate until they leave the country. So that 6 or 7 weeks, they think they shouldn't be paying tax, and probably shouldn't be, but that's not the way the law was written. Talking about values, I guess, is probably the most interesting part for real estate people. We have to value every single year 290,000 parcels of real estate and about 26,000 tangible personal property accounts like restaurant equipment and things like that. And where it gets interesting is the Florida Constitution states that I must appraise the property at fair market value or just value, as we refer to it. And we all know the definition of just or fair market value. It's what a willing buyer would pay and what a willing seller would accept. But when you get into the rule book, the Florida Department of Revenue says that fair market value or just value is the net proceeds the seller would get after a closing. And then you sit there and you say, well, how do we know what net proceeds are? And they'd be different in every one. Well, after numerous lawsuits, it seems funny, but it ended up in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court of Florida made a determination that sellers get 85% of the sales price. So I've got to assess property by law at 85% of what you and I would really think is fair market value. Then the Department of Revenue says in their training manual that my role will pass if I'm within 10% of the 85%. So I can be 10% low or I can be 10% high. My target is always to be 10% low. So really what I'm targeting is trying somewhere to be around 76.5% of a property's value. It's not an easy target to hit exactly, but I'm trying to get as low as I can. This year, the state of Florida certified my tax roll at 90.9% of the 85%. There were only 3 counties in Florida that had a lower tax roll than we had. So, that's something I've always been very, very proud of. The 2 or 3 times in the, I guess I'm in my 14th year now, we've had our tax roll sent back to us by the Department of Revenue and said it's too low. And I've always taken that as a badge of honor that they thought it was too low, because they allow me to correct it. And we tweak it a little bit and then they approve it at like 90.1% or something. If they don't approve it, and there's been a couple times up in the Panhandle where the tax roll just doesn't get approved on time, what happens is the Department of Revenue then removes everybody's homestead in the county, which would make me a real popular person. When we're appraising property, our biggest concern is that you're treated fairly and equitable. You always should be able to sell your house for more than the value that we put on it. But my biggest concern is that you look at your neighbor's property and you look at your property and you say, hey, my property is fair compared to my neighbor's, or my neighbor's is fair compared to what I have. Sometimes we get some real creative realtors or buyers that do a lot of research off our numbers, and they'll sit there and they'll say, hey, in this condo building, you seem to be at like 90% of value. In this condo building, you seem to be at 88% of value. Why are you doing that? And I don't know. It's just who's appraising it, who's looking at it. My main concern is that everybody in that building feels that they were assessed fairly. I want them to feel that their unit has a better view and they paid a little more in taxes. We had a guy come into us, I think it's about 3 or 4 years ago now, lived in a gated community, and he came in with all his MLS sheets and he said, look, I've been trying to actively sell my house and it's always been priced less than your assessment and I don't have a buyer on it. My quick answer was, we've got your house over assessed. We've got to lower your house. But I can't just lower your house, and you're in a gated community and we're comparing all these houses to each other. We've got to lower them all, or we've got to go back and see where we made a mistake. So people will ask me, does one sale change something? No, one sale doesn't change anything. We've got to look at numerous sales, and we've got to look at the whole community. My assessing value really only has one purpose, and that's to allow taxing districts to fairly tax you for the costs that they incur in running government. And I know that you use my values. I know that FEMA uses my values. Insurance companies do, but it's not designed for them. And they create problems using my values. Take a Country Club Shores house, for instance, 2,500 square foot air conditioned house, built in 1967. If it goes on the market and sells, you and I both know what's going to happen. They're going to scrape the house and they're going to build a new house. So when we look at houses in Country Club Shores or any area where they're rebuilding a lot of the older houses, it's pretty easy for us to figure out what the land value is. So we figure out the land value. It's also real easy for us to figure out what the value of the pool is, the patio, the seawall in this case, and whatever's left over, we put onto the house. So you'll find houses out in Country Club Shores where we value the structure at $25,000. You might see where this is starting to go, because the insurance company looks at our aerials, the insurance company looks at Google Earth, and then they tell the people that their perfectly watertight roof needs replacing. So what happens is they go into a building permit, and the county building officials then look at my website and they say, your house is worth $25,000 according to the property appraiser. FEMA's 50% rule won't allow you to replace the roof. So the people are now mad at me because they've got one of two things. They got to go out and get another appraisal from a real legitimate appraiser, not one that's appraising property for taxation, and they've got to pay for it, and it's going to delay the entire process. And then the other thing, some of them have called me up and said that I've insulted them. Come look at my home. You need to reallocate the land value and the building value. But the one factor in those cases that we know is the land value. So we can't just arbitrarily change their land value and leave their neighbors' land values high. So they have to go out and get an appraiser to come out and look at their house and give them an accurate fair market value appraisal. Most of our appraisal work today, and we learned this a lot with the COVID, but we've always done probably 50% of our appraisal work in-house, in the office. But now we're doing a lot more from our computers. We use aerial photography. We use street level photography. We love what you post online when you sit there, and the people are of course always describing their house to us as, less than average quality. And then you put the gold fixtures in the bathroom online, and we post, pull those up and show the people, what the inside really looks like. And we use a computer assisted mass appraisal system. But in January, a lot of times people will see a car driving up and down the street, and there's all those cameras up on the roof, and they think Google Earth's out there taking pictures. That's usually us. We drive every street in the county in January and get street level photography. We also fly the county. We fly every square inch of the county and take high resolution aerial photography. And that photography is really great because the same company's been doing it for us for years and years. And what they do is they take last year's photography and they overlay this year's photography on it. And then anything that was there last year and has been removed this year, they outline in red. And anything that was there or wasn't there last year and is there now, they outline in green. So we can kind of target, instead of going out and looking at 290,000 pieces of property, we can say to our people, hey, go look at all the ones that are either red or green on the aerials and drive by them and see what you see. Oh, one of the other things, I get a lot of calls from people and they sit there and they say, I'm asking this question for a friend, is how it always starts. These people are getting ready to sell their 2-1, And over the course of 3 or 4 or 5, 10 years, whatever, they have constructed it into a 3-2 without pulling permits, and they've done all the work themselves. And now they're getting ready to sell. So when people look at my website, see a 2-1, they want it to be a 3-2. We'll be glad to come out. If there's something wrong with a house that you're listing or a house that you're selling or a house that you own, we'll come out and we'll look at it. We want our website to be as correct as possible. So if it is a 3-2, we'll make it a 3-2 on our website. And we're not the zoning police, we're not code enforcement. We could care less if you've got permits on that property. All we're doing is trying to make sure that our website accurately reflects what's there. And we don't care anything about the permits. But saying that, I'd like you to remember too, when you look at our website, remember one thing, that our data is always as of January 1. But just because we show a 3-2 doesn't mean it's a 3-2. Don't assume that our square footage is correct. Prior to me taking office in 2009, our field appraisers were going out and running tapes around the outside of the house and rounding every measurement to the closest inch. So, you know, you have a house with all these nooks and crannies and you're rounding every one of those to the closest inch, you can be off a little bit. And January 1 is an important date for us. Everything on our website is reflected as of January 1. It creates a couple problems for people that are using my website that shouldn't be using my website. But say a builder comes in tomorrow and that builder says, I bought a 1-acre lot and I'd like to split that lot into 2 half-acre lots. Can you give me 2 separate property ID numbers? That's easy to do. You know, I'm the keeper of the records for the county. I'm the keeper of their maps. And then he says, I'd like the property split on your map. Well, my map reflects what was there January 1. So I can't go in there and split it on my map until next January 1. But he goes to the city of Sarasota building department and they tell him they won't issue a permit till they see it on my map. And again, they shouldn't be using my map. So I have to write them a letter and say, I can't correct it till January 1. And then he's got to argue with them and see if he can get it done. We put new values online in mid-January. So when you see the values come online, if you look at them, we usually have them done in January, pending getting the mailing ready for the August trim notice and everything. But, you know, I caution you, even if you understand the formula of where I'm trying to value property, those numbers aren't real accurate for you in the real estate business. If you're looking at my numbers now, those numbers were based on sales that occurred in probably October or closed in October, November, December of 2020. So that's what we're looking at. So we can give you a January 1 number. So if they closed in October, maybe they were written in August or September. So right now, what you're looking at is 2-year-old data. It doesn't make a lot of sense to try and take formulas and use my numbers, though I know a lot of people do. One of the biggest problems I have is getting people to try and understand that we don't make any predictions. You know, the questions that I'll get typically when I'm talking is, you know, what's the legacy trail in my backyard going to do to my property values? What's Benderson's project at Stickney Point going to do to property values around there? 3 hotels get built on Siesta Key. What's that going to do to values? And the quick answer is we have no idea. We probably won't have any idea until the hotels are finished or the legacy trails finished. And 2 or 3 years later, we can sit there and we can look and say it affected values or it didn't affect values. But we have no way to predict the future. You know, we can look back through our data, and we've got a wealth of data on our website, and we can tell you from January of 2020 to January of 2021, apartment buildings went up 23%. And that's factual. You know, single family homes went up 10%, condos went up 5%. And those are accurate numbers because we're real good at looking back in time. And I laugh because I see all these numbers and kind of work with them and geek with the numbers. But, you know, I'm sure you've heard everybody talk about new construction and how crazy new construction is. And everybody's sitting there going, we have never in Sarasota County seen new construction at this rate. And I sit there and I ask them, I said, weren't you here in 2006 or 2007? During the 12 months of 2020, last year, we had completed 3,676 new homes. That was finished, got their CO. We only had 197 condo units finished in that 12 months. In 2006, we had 6,200 new homes finished and almost 1,400 condos finished. So, you know, going from 197 to 1,400 10 years ago, you know, our new construction values in 12 months of 2020, we added $1.8 billion to the tax roll. We added in 2005, 2006, 2007, we added over 2.2 billion each year. So we still aren't back to where we were in that run up before the Great Recession. Let's talk about homesteads for a second, because that's another issue that we get into with you all. And you're eligible for one homestead in the United States. And it's like saying to somebody, this is my primary residence. This is where I tell people I vote from. This is the license on my driver's license. You're allowed one in the United States. And Florida has the strongest homestead protection laws of any state in the nation. You are allowed just homestead. And how do you get homestead? You move into the property, or you own the property and you tell people, this is my primary residence. There's no filing requirement for homestead. And Florida allows you to protect a half acre of your property if you're within the city limits, or 160 acres outside a city from a creditor filing a lien against you and forcing the sale of your primary residence. That's why you see so many people that they're in a civil case in New York or in Connecticut, up north somewhere, and they know they're going to lose, get their clock cleaned, and they're going to lose their $10 million they have in a savings account. They'll come to Florida and they'll buy 160 acres out in the country with an $8 million house on it, and that's now safe from any lawsuit that they get in. I have a lot of those cases. So with Florida's homestead, you're allowed homestead tax exemption, which most people confuse the two things. But that must be applied for and take effect January 1 when it takes effect. There's no requirement. The other thing people get confused on, there's no requirement for you to ever be in that house. You know, people I hear all the time, and it was funny when we moved into a new house in Esplanade about 5 years ago, I would say that on my street, half the people were part-time residents. And they all would come up to me and they'd say, hey, I'm here and I'm in New York, but I'm here 6 months in a day. There's no Florida law that says you have to be in your homestead 6 months in a day. There's no Florida law that says you need to be there at any point in time. What the law says is you can't return it or can't rent it over January 1st. But what people confuse is some states say, if you have a business in that state, you have to pay state income tax. But if you're not in the state for 6 months, you don't have to pay their state income tax. So they confuse that with the requirement thinking you have to be in Florida, but there is no such requirement. We had an interesting property appraiser case in the Panhandle. Most of the weird stuff happens up there for some reason, but there was a lady who was in a coma in a nursing home, and for numerous years, I think like 4 years, and her family kept thinking she was going to be okay and she was going to come back. She had homestead tax exemption on her house. The family had kept the house vacant, hoping someday she would return. The property appraiser said enough's enough, and he took away the homestead tax exemption. The property appraiser got sued by the family, and when it went to court, the court said, do you know if she had the intent to return or not? And the property appraiser basically said, how would I know if she had the intent to return because she's in a coma? And the court said, well, then you don't know she doesn't intend to return and you can't take away her exemption. And that's really what the law has boiled down to now. You need to have the intent to return to your house. That's how O.J. Simpson, serving time out in Vegas for all his stuff, kept his homestead for 3 or 4 years because he never rented the house. He let his son live in it. Now, the easiest way to lose your homestead is to rent it, homestead tax exemption, rent it over January 1st. The other thing that can cause you to lose it, and this is a law that passed a couple of years ago when Senator John Thrasher was Senate president, and he said that he had a lot of friends. He lives in Sawgrass up in Ponte Vedra, if you know that area. And they have the big PGA tournament, and all their houses up there are huge. And these people could move out of the house for a week and rent it for $30,000 or $40,000. And they wanted to do this every year. and the homestead laws didn't allow that. So he changed the law, or got it passed, that the law now says you lose your homestead if you rent it for more than 30 days in 2 consecutive years. And again, that's one of the ones that everybody interprets really wildly. Florida law says you lose your homestead and all the rights, not tax exemption, just your homestead. You lose your homestead and all the rights associated with that, like not getting it taken away, if you leave your homestead for more than 6 months. So that's kind of a key thing in my interpretation of this new law, because he says you lose your homestead if you rent it for more than 30 days in 2 consecutive years. Well, I feel you could rent it for less than 6 months in 1 year, because you lose it in 6 months by state law, and then you could rent it up to 29 days the next year. So some property appraisers say, no, 30 days per year, you lose your homestead. We say you can rent it up to a year, 1 year, up to 30 days, the next year, up to a year, and go back and forth like that. But again, that's one of the ones that is determined county by county. Homestead tax fraud occurs when somebody sits there, and there were a lot of people that the husband would sit there and say, I'm going to vote in Florida. I'm going to get a driver's license in Florida. I'm going to put the Florida house in my name. And then the wife says, I'm going to take the Ohio house in my name, and I'll get an Ohio driver's license, and I'll get an Ohio voter, and you can get homestead on your Florida house, and I'll get homestead on the Ohio house. The law doesn't allow that, and the law frowns on that. So what they've come up with, if we find out that somebody is doing that, we notify the tax collector. Tax collector removes all of the exemptions on their property, and they can go back 10 years. They remove the $50,000, they remove the cap if there is one. They recompute the taxes going back 10 years. They add a 50% penalty and 15% interest. So they're really stern on that. And that's not one of the ones that the property appraiser may do this, or the tax collector may do that. That's one that's required by law. And the tax collector can lien every piece of property that that person owns in Florida. So they are real serious about that. The largest one we got, which I think was really interesting, and I felt bad for the guy, but when they added back everything, it was just over $950,000 on a waterfront house in Sarasota County that he owed in penalties and interest. I guess the interesting thing in that one was, we tried to fight that one on his behalf, but the guy acquired a second home in Maryland. And in Maryland, the property appraiser, homestead in Maryland's a county thing, it's not a state thing. And in Maryland, the property appraiser reads the closing documents and determines if they're entitled to a homestead or not. So it doesn't even have a filing requirement for it. So this guy did not file for homestead, but his mortgage lender said, if this is going to be your primary residence, I can give you a better rate. The guy, thinking it's primary residence, not knowing really the definition, he said, I'm never going to rent the property. So yeah, it's my primary residence. So he signs all the loan documents, including the one that says it's his primary residence. The property appraiser in Chevy Chase reads it and says, oh, it's a homestead, and gives him his homestead exemption. And we didn't catch it for 8 years. And so we went to DOR and we said on that one, you know, do we really have to hit this guy with 15% interest, 50% penalty? He was filing out-of-state income tax in Maryland. And DOR says, you know, the law is the law and you got to stick to it. So in that case, it was one we advised the guy to sue us because we can settle lawsuits. And we ended up settling with him. But the sad thing was he had a $3 million cap on his house and he lost that forever. I mean, that couldn't be settled. Most often we catch violators when somebody turns them in. Somebody turns in a neighbor, and I'd say that probably accounts for 75% of them. But we also have a very sophisticated program that's kind of interesting because it matches anybody in the United States that you've shared an address with. So for me, when they came in and they did a demo on it, they said, let's see people you've shared an address with. And it came up with about 800 or 900. I managed a Caldwell Banker office at 423 St. Armand Circle. So it listed every one of those associates because I had shared that address with them. I had some rental properties. It shared a lot of names that I wished I hadn't remembered. And then I said to him, well, make it people I've shared like 3 addresses with. And then it was basically, you know, my kids and my wife. But so it will show you showing an address, you know, the example I used earlier, it would show the man with his property in Florida and the wife sharing an address in both locations. And so we would know to go after those people. Brings up a case, can a husband and wife ever have 2 homesteads in Florida? And the answer is, well, it depends on the property appraiser and it depends on the circumstances. Some property appraisers, when we have these discussions, say it's not going to happen in my county. Some property appraisers say if they have a legal separation order approved by the court, I would allow them to do it. And the Department of Revenue does have a separate family unit. And in that case, you have to swear under oath that you file separate tax returns. You have nothing in joint ownership. You never vacation together. You never spend the night in the other person's house. And you are 2 separate lives. Why would that happen? Maybe the people are getting divorced and one of them has some medical issues and can't get insurance, but the other person's still working and is covering their insurance. I mean, there are reasons that 2 people could, you know, act separate individuals and both have homesteads. I'm sure you know about the cap and the portability, but some of the stories there on in a divorce, you know, if 2 people are married, they own property as tenants by the entireties. And you've got to be married to be tenants by the entireties. So when people become divorced, they automatically become tenants in common. So they went from owning the property by the entireties to owning the property 50-50 with their ex-spouse. Well, one person moves out. They don't think about the fact that since they own 50%, they have 50% of the cap, they have 50% of the homestead, they move out, 50% of the cap and homestead dissolves. The divorce stories that we get and people coming in on those are really humorous. A couple of things that you might be interested in. I don't know if you've ever been on my website and you've looked up an address and the address comes back as just nothing. It doesn't exist, vaporware. Or you've gone to my maps and you'll see that all the properties have codes on them and PID numbers and everything, but there's one property there that has nothing on it. Well, what happened was the state passed a law saying certain people are allowed confidentiality. Somebody, for instance, a victim of a violent crime, sworn law enforcement officers, somebody that works for Department of Children and Family Services, state's attorneys, judges, people like that. They can come in and they can file paperwork and they say, we want nothing showing on any of your paperwork that the public can see that we even exist. So all their information is totally exempt. What's happened is the title insurance people and some of the people in real estate closing industries have gone out and got lobbyists and they said, you know, that just makes our job impossible because when we erase everything associated with that person, we erase all the sales history of that property. So the last 4 or 5 owners, everything's gone. I mean, it's just like that property does not exist. And so they got the law changed. So effective October 1, the only thing that can be withheld from our information is the name of the person and any link to a deed where they acquired it. So we actually have got ours changed this week, but we've already started getting calls from, you know, firemen or officers of the law that sit there and go, hey, all of a sudden my information's online. Well, your name's not online, but yes, everything else is online. And you can't search by missing owners. So you could have, but we've got that blocked. Another thing that happened that came up, as you should know about, that affects it is the time that you have to transfer your portability. When the law first came out, it said portability, you've got 2 years to port your cap on your house. And I assume you all know cap. It's the difference between what the fair market value goes up and the assessed value. But if you're selling your house, you've got 2 years to find another house. The problem with the 2 years is because everything in our in our area works on January 1, you've got 2 calendar years. So in other words, if you sold your house today, 2021 is 1 year, 2022 is the next year. So you only get maybe 14 months in there. They just changed that from 2 to 3, and it went into effect the day the governor signed it. So, now we say that you've got 3 years to port, but remember, if you did a sale today, you would have to own your new home in 2023, because 21's 1 year, 22's a year, and January 1 of 24 starts year 4. So, be careful with that. I can't think of a lot else unless some of you have some questions, but there are gaps. I laugh that, Darla and I were driving down Casey Key about 6 weeks ago. We had gone to lunch at the Casey Key Fish House, and we were driving down Casey Key Road, and the 2500 block of Casey Key Road was a shell of a house. I mean, massive fire destroyed this mansion. And so Darla Googled it. She reads me the story of the house burning on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. And so, of course, I'm sitting there saying, oh my God, go on my website, see if I've got a house on that property. Because if it burned down before January 1, then it should be not there this year. And she, oh yeah, you got a $4 million property on that house. And it was like 4 days before we were mailing out the trim notices. So fortunately, we got that one caught, because I'm sure that would have been an irate phone call. But, if you see something on our site that doesn't look right, give us a call, because, we make errors on it. And, people will call me up and say, hey, why does one property double in value last year? Well, we were wrong. We caught something, we found something that wasn't there. So, when we do find mistakes on our site, we can correct them. We can go back and correct them, but it's not perfect. We do the best we can, and got some great young kids that are running my website. And, if you see something that would help you, they're glad to make a change on there, if it would help a lot of people. So that's about all I can think to talk about, unless some of you have questions. No questions. Everybody on mute? Cassidy? Well, that is all I have. And if you
I have
think
a
of,
question.
okay.
Quick question. How do we, when we're looking at new construction and what the properties have sold for, what's the easiest way to look at that? So as realtors, we can do a CMA more accurately, because it's not, we can't always go by MLS. Not all builders put in the homes that they have sold in the MLS. And yet, now with people having to waive appraisals with new home construction, right? Often the question becomes, well, am I overpaying for this house with this builder? But it's a new community, so if I try to do a CMA, there's not a lot of data available.
But like my daughter bought in a new community, and the sales are recorded accurately by the builder. I mean, so you've got all the sales number. Whether they overpaid in this market or not, it's a question that you've got to answer.
Correct, but they're recorded. Where are they recorded? Because they're not in MLS necessarily.
Oh, they're recorded. They're recorded with the clerk of the court, and usually the clerk of the court has the sale recorded on her website within 48 hours, I would say. We usually have it on our website within 7 days, because we've got to have somebody look at it. We've got to confirm it was an arm's length transaction, and we've got to classify that sale before we put it on our records, so the state knows that we thought it was legitimate, not legitimate, included furniture, didn't include furniture. So there's some hoops we have to jump through, but usually 7 days after the closing, it will be on my website.
So what's the easiest way to look at all the sales in a specific community at your website, as opposed to looking like one property at a time?
If you're good with Excel, you can download it. You can download the whole community. Everything on my website is downloadable.
Okay.
You can export it to Excel.
do we do it by map? Like we can put some boundaries to identify a specific community, or do we just put a subdivision name and then it pulls everything?
It's whatever you're searching. I would assume it'd
Okay.
be a subdivision name.
Okay,
So, and to that point, if, any of the brokers that are on the call would have an interest, we have a couple of really sharp people that do all our website stuff, and they'll be glad to come out and do an office meeting for you and explain, how to use our website, how to download data, how to do things on our website.
yeah, that would be very, very valuable, because I've had to use it a couple of times in trying to make these assessments here. And then to understand correctly what you talked about, for the most part, on average, the assessed values that we're going to see on your site for property taxes is going to be about 85% of what the sales price of the home last was.
I'd probably use 90 just to cover yourself, because if you're
90,
you're
okay.
quoting somebody too low, they're going to be mad at you.
Correct, correct.
So, I would probably, and I hate predicting the future or trying to predict the future, but I would tell somebody I was selling a home to, take the sales price, knock 10% off it, and apply last year's millage to that. And that's the highest your taxes would probably be.
Okay, great, great. Because I've been just to be safe, I've been using just the straight sales price.
Yeah, I think you
millage
could probably use 90% of the sales price and be equally
90%
safe.
was safe. Perfect. That is great. And then the other thing, did I hear correctly that, so let's say somebody lives in New York and that's their primary residence, and they buy a second home here. They're not going to rent it out. It's just going to be their second home for them to come whenever they want to come. They can still homestead that second home here, or no?
They can homestead the home here, provided they don't have any exemptions on the New York home that require it be a primary residence.
Okay.
And it can be triggered by, Vermont has a veteran can get $150 tax break on his primary residence. But if a veteran is taking that $150 on his Vermont house, he could not have a homestead in Florida. I mean,
Okay.
it's ridiculous, but that's the way it is. Now, they could, there's some of you remember Tom Lyons when he was writing for the newspaper. He would always take me to task because people in Gulfgate would start calling him saying, there's a family in Gulfgate that doesn't pay any tax and they don't live here. And so then he'd always call me and ask me about it, and I'd have to remind him he had called me before about it. But there was a family in Gulfgate. He was like a double amputee and a veteran, and he was totally tax exempt. So he lived in Vermont full-time with his wife. She had her driver's license here. He was blind, so he had a ID card. They both voted in Florida, though they voted absentee, I'm sure. And they only came to Florida when they could afford the trip down here. So sometimes they came once a year, sometimes they came every other year. But they didn't have any exemption anywhere else. So they're perfectly qualified for tax exemption in Florida.
Okay, so that's the caveat, that they cannot have any other tax exemption in any other state.
That's correct.
Okay, okay.
I
Thank
got a
you.
question from Jeff O'Berry. Says, do widowers get the same discount on homestead that widows do? Yeah, it's funny. They do. It's a very small discount, but there's only like 2,000 widowers in Sarasota County that own a primary residence when there's about 3,500 females.
Okay.
Regarding homestead, should we tell buyers to apply for homestead before March 1st, or should we be telling them they can apply until 25 days after the trim? Well, I don't know what they do in Manatee County, so I'm just answering for Sarasota County. I would tell them to apply the day they buy. When they close, give them a checklist, tell them to go apply, because they can apply online and get it done, get it out of the way. They might be applying for next year, but just get it done.
Hey, Bill, can you talk about new construction? And a lot of times on-site salespeople will say, your assessed value will be some percentage of your sale price. Do you use a percentage? Is that accurate? How do you estimate taxes for new construction, or for people to estimate taxes for new construction?
If I'm talking about the assessed value, David, I'd sit there and say, high point, 90% of what you're paying for it. Then apply the millage, find property around there and whatever the millage is on surrounding property.
Okay.
But, I think I would probably tell them 90% is the highest it will be.
Okay, good.
Hi, Bill. Juliana, question, actually two for you.
Okay.
One regarding bedroom count and another homestead. Just to be clear, I went to a listing appointment. It shows as a 3-bedroom. You walk in, it's clearly been a garage. A 1-car garage was changed into another bedroom. And the kids say, hey, it's always been like that, even when we lived here. Obviously, the roof line is the same, so you can't tell exactly when it was switched over. So if we call and ask that you go out and review the property, there's not going to be an alert to the permit department?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We do not communicate with them in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. And then also with homestead, if a person owns one property only in Florida, and they move into another home in Florida temporarily to take care of someone, and that's for an unknown period of time, say it could be over a year, but their intent is to return, and the home is not rented in the meantime. They are still able to hold that homestead for what could be a couple years if the home is
Yes,
vacant. Okay.
absolutely. They can, as long as they don't rent it, they're fine. But beware of the one thing that could hang you up is, and we've had this happen numerous times. Person said, I never rented my house. I intended to return to it. And I said, yeah, but you went to this other house and you went to the supervisor of elections and told them you want to vote in that other district, which means you're telling the supervisor of elections that that is your permanent residence. So
Okay.
if you permanently change your driver's license, you change your voter's ID, you've told other people you've changed your personal residence, whether you did or not.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
I have another question as well. In regards to the bedrooms, so I looked up like the Florida definition of what can count as a bedroom, and as long as it has a window and a door for privacy that can be closed, then whether or not it has a closet is irrelevant. It can be considered and defined as a bedroom. So, but usually especially with a lot of the new construction, there's 2 bedrooms and a den, but the den still has that window and still has the door. It just doesn't have a closet. When you go to the appraisers, it's labeled as a 2-bedroom, 2-bath home. So how does the appraiser's office define a bedroom, and when do they decide to put it as a 3 or as a 2?
We sit there and we look at the builder's brochure. The builder's selling you a 2-bedroom house. We call it a 2-bedroom house. But I wouldn't get caught up in the number of bedrooms, because we're looking at the square footage of the house too. So
Correct.
that you change a bedroom, now you add a bathroom, that might add a little bit of money. But whether it's a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom, it's still in the same square footage. I don't think it's going to change anything very much.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it becomes just more relevant for listing purposes and marketability, right? Because a 3-bedroom is more marketable than just a 2-bedroom.
See, that's your job. That's not mine.
Yeah. But then it becomes an issue because we want to list it as a 3-bedroom, but then the buyers are going to the public records going, no, wait a minute, it's a 2-bedroom. And then we have to go through a whole educational process of, well, it's still considered a bedroom, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah,
in
and
that case,
we get into a lot of these things. And again, it's people that are using my website that shouldn't be using my website.
Okay.
There were some condos out on Golden Gate Point where they took basically the outside of the building off. They took everything on the inside, but they left the basic floor. And then, they come in, they say, we want you to say that this building was built in, 2012 because we did a massive remodel. And I can't say it was built in 2012 because the basic structure dates back to some other date. Or a current example, you realize that Dolphin Towers downtown changed their name. And I don't remember what they changed it to, but so they're saying to me, we want you to change the name on your website. Well, no, it's still platted as Dolphin Towers. You go into getting everything changed on the public records and remove Dolphin Towers, we can probably do something. But other than that, it's still called Dolphin Towers on the public records.
Okay. And how easy it is? So let's say the seller wants to have it changed in public records to a 3-bedroom instead of being a two-bedroom with a den. What's the process? How do we do that quickly?
I guess you could call up and have one of our appraisers come out and look at it.
Okay.
Let me go to another question. And I get this a lot. The question is, when a buyer asks us to estimate the property taxes on a home they want to buy, is there a rule of thumb? I think we've covered that from a different angle. A lot of people are saying, can I say 1.5% or 2% or whatever? What I would do is just tell them the maximum tax would be, as I've said a couple times, take 90% of what they're paying for it and look at the millage rate, and that's the maximum it would be. But I don't think there's any good rule of thumb. Anything else? Well, I would probably close with and just say that if you have a question, please call us. We're more than willing to answer questions. Come out and look at your property. We're here to help, and you're paying us to be here.
Hey, Bill, can you hear me?
Yeah, Jeff.
I'm sorry, I did have another question. I'm sorry to catch you right as you're wrapping up with this. I work out at the St. Armand's office that you used to be at. I've been there about 6 years. Started in real estate late in life. Bob Huff hired me on. And I think he hired me on thinking I was going to be a whiz-bang listing agent. And this late in life, as it's turned out, I prefer working with buyers, but I do take an occasional listing, and I have one coming up that is a very atypical property. In other words, it's the opposite from a cookie cutter. It's kind of a one-of-a-kind piece of property and home. Can you give me advice when it comes to doing the CMAs, what the best way to approach trying to price that property is? Now, I did sell this home to the person who's getting ready to, in other words, I brought the buyer who now is years later is going to sell it. So I was involved in their purchase of this when I first started. So, I mean, I've got at least that background with it, but it's been challenging to find the comps and to feel confident in what I'm trying to set the price at.
Yeah, and I feel your pain, but as I tell you, what I do is I look backwards. I look back and say, hey, it's sold for X. We don't try and predict or get into what should you price it at. That's a whole nother field.
Okay.
Hey, Bill, one last question before you go. A lot of times people do improvements to their house, and the assessments or the taxes are not out in a year, and you're using the old assessed value, and now you've got an improvement that's made to the house. Will the property appraiser offer an informal assessment or tell you what the assessed value would be with that improvement so the taxes at closing can be prorated accordingly?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I guess we certainly could go out and look at the house. We'd love to go out and look at houses. That's what we do. But it's probably something they could tell you this isn't going to change much, or it is going to change much. But then the other thing I would probably say to you is, if they've made interior improvements that we have no idea about, why would you bring it to our attention?
Well, not talking about interior improvements. Let's say we added an addition, an extra bedroom addition or a family room addition. We actually changed the structure of the house.
Oh yeah, give us a call. We'll send somebody out and they'll take a look at it and give you a best guess.
Yeah, because the sales contract has in it that scenario for improvements that are made to a property that are not in the property appraiser's assessed value, but will be in the next tax bill. And if you're prorating taxes based on the previous tax bill that the assessed value doesn't have those improvements reflected in, then you need to get informal. And I've really never asked that question of you as to whether you will offer that informal or formal
Sure, because
reassessment.
yeah, we're going to want to come out and measure the house and look at it, and we're going to want to keep our records straight. And back on Jeff's question about, the not typical house, I will tell you, those are the ones that we are the worst on. And I'll see some of these houses sell out on Longboat, especially the prices they're getting now, or Casey Key. The first thing I do is look up CR value. Those big houses are the ones that have all the little intricate things in them. I'll see one sell at 10 million and we'll have it on at 4 or 5, and I cringe because the paper always likes to say, and the property appraiser thought it was worth 4. So, we check those, but those are the hard ones for us. When you get the little cookie cutter homes, I think we're pretty good on them. The big ones and the special houses, we just don't have them where we should have them. Anything else? All right, thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you, Bill.
All
We
right.
appreciate it. And appreciate you being here and doing this session for us. And I think if anybody has any more questions, they would be able to get a hold of you pretty easy. So thank you for being here today.
All right, thanks, Cassidy.